So we have Dr. Horne here to go over implicit bias training.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
I'm good, not too much Marty in my bra, trying to recover. I'm Bennetta Horne. I am Assistant Dean for Excellence and Dynamic Innovation. I just said that because EDI tends to be bad words now, and yeah. So I'm Assistant Dean for EDI here at the School of Medicine. I have been at Tulane for greater than 20 years, almost 10 years in the med school. And I was recruited to first start with medical students to create a diverse student body that has gotten expanded to faculty, residents, administration, and the kitchen sink. And I embrace it because it's not my occupation, it's also my vocation. So I'm here today to talk to you about implicit bias. I am using the presentation that I use for executive searches, search committees for positions. My goal is to, number one, not bore you to death. Number two, get you out on time. And number three, infuse a little humanity into bias training. Sometimes when they know that I'm coming, I get the size, I get the, we have to do this again, I did this already. I did it at the VA, I did it at UMMC, why again? And it's just a reminder. I want you to always remember that everyone is a human being. Not only your patients, but your colleagues, your supervisor, your chairs, the dean, me, and anybody can have a bad day. So we're not gonna point fingers. We're not gonna assume everybody is a raging racist. We're not gonna assume any of those things. We're gonna have a conversation for about an hour and we'll see. So. Next one. So I ask that you communicate openly and respectfully. The topics are a little sensitive, as we all know. I want you to be as comfortable as you can be. I'm going to invite you to share, maybe play a couple of games. And I want to remind you of the humanity of everyone. We will talk a little bit about intersectionality. I don't know if you have heard that term, but it's one I want to introduce to you. It was coined by a professor, Kimberly Crenshaw. And what it basically says is no one is a monolith. So when I come into this room, I'm not just a woman. I'm not just Black. I'm not just a PhD. I'm not just a mom. I'm not just a wife, I'm not just an administrator, I'm not just any of those things, but I'm the sum of all of those things. And all of those things intersect. And literally, depending on which intersection you get, determines what I'm on that day. What I'm feeling, what my emotional state is, what my mental state is, how happy I am about how the world is going. And so I want you to remember that and know that you two all are a combination of all of your identities. You're not just one thing. And so that determines a lot. I want you to listen openly to me, to your colleagues. I want you to participate. And again, there's that word humanity again that I like to insert. So in continuing talking about intersectionality, what I just said, all of your characteristics intersect. Okay, you can see the whole thing. And that wheel of power and privilege on the right is very important. And I want you to understand that you can be well represented or overrepresented in one category and be underrepresented in another category. So it's privilege or power versus marginalization. So depending on maybe your religion, or maybe even your body type, or maybe even your mental state or mental health, or if you've ever been unhoused, or if English is your first language. All of those things can determine where you lie on the power wheel. So the closer you are to the center, the more power you possess. The further you are on the outskirts, the less power or the more marginalized, and I will use the word minoritized, you can be. So you can be a trans, intersex, non-binary, slim person who is able-bodied, but also who has been unhoused. So privileged and also minoritized at the same time, given what we're talking about on any given day. So I want to remind you of that and realize how others are judged, how others are sometimes looked down upon just because of where they may lie on the power wheel at any given moment, but also that you can be both. Because depending on how you see me, some people might look and say, well, maybe because of race or gender, I'm minoritized. But also I'm terminally degreed, and this month pretty slim. So maybe I'm not. So keep in mind, our identities vary. We're gonna start, I'm gonna ask you to humor me a few times, and I'm gonna start with this one. We're gonna do an imagery exercise, and I'm gonna ask if you will close your eyes. And I'm going to describe some persons to you, and I want you to picture these persons in your mind, and we're gonna talk about them at the end. So the first person is a teenage boy who lives in Dallas, Texas, who attends a high school for gifted and performing arts students. And he was born in Honduras. Now that you have him in your mind, our second person is a white female. She's a second-year family medicine resident, and she is living with an opioid addiction. Our third person is a father of three. He is a gay man of Korean ancestry, and he just celebrated his 77th birthday. Our next person is an extremely wealthy Haitian American woman. She's also a single mother of 4 children, and she's a partner at a prestigious law firm. And our last person is a white male. He's a world-class triathlete. He's a recent silver medalist in the Olympic Games, and he requires a prosthetic leg for mobility. Our final person is a trans woman, a 47-year-old physician. She's an Indigenous American, part of the Navajo Nation. And she's an interventional cardiologist at a leading medical center. You could please open your eyes and talk to me about those people.
I guess I have like a little recency bias just because like I know of a white male athlete that lost his legs and is competing, and he's from Arkansas, and so like I actually know him pretty well, and so that is like immediately the first person like I thought of whenever I saw like started picturing that.
I think the last part and most of those characters kind of took me for a little spin.
Also,
Well, obviously with the Olympic one, and the prosthetic leg, but like for like the Dallas kid, I wasn't picturing someone from Central America. And like a few other examples.
Yeah, the Korean American, I didn't think it'd be old.
Yeah,
I was like 77, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, I was thinking it was gonna be like.
It's,
What's the status?
We're going right now. He's in the
You
middle.
ready?
You
We
started.
already started.
I think you already missed the first exercise.
Those are nice.
Tell you about that.
that's probably the biggest shock. And then like when you said for the kid from Honduras, his math and science, I immediately put flat. It's definitely.
I was kind of struggling to imagine most of them, I think, like to incorporate all of those qualities all together.
Actually, I thought it was easy to, like, the first thing you'd say, it would be easy to picture a person, but then like, when you start to add things, I'm like, I don't know how. Like, obviously, most of the time, it wasn't what you first pictured, so I'm like, how do I change
The
it?
more you
You
added
take
so many
the-
layers, I was like, I don't know anybody like this.
Think of someone from like the movie or the TV that represents some of that, or
My head, I always try to figure out the hairstyle, and then the trans female, I struck the position. We going hair bun or long hair? What are we doing?
so you were putting physical characteristics on the person. I heard someone say, I was trying to picture that person, but I don't know anybody like that.
Yeah.
Or I can't imagine those layers.
Yeah, like I don't think I know anybody who's like almost like every single one.
So, I saw this in another training and borrowed it, and I changed the characteristics, and, I've also now switched up the order in which I tell you the characteristics, because, I hope that you see or recognize your own biases when I start describing people. And for different persons, that could be different things. You know, it might be race or gender or age that triggers how you're thinking differently. And it's like, okay, maybe I don't know anybody like that, but I could.
and also like the family medicine resident with opioid addiction. You're like, I was picturing, I know that there are definitely residents that nobody has any idea that have drug addictions or alcohol addiction, and they just look like any other resident. I'm like, it's just. Yeah, a picture like, one person in particular, but I'm just like, they won't look any different than any other resident.
Absolutely. And that just brings the point, you never know what someone is dealing with and also what their history is, because your history does not determine your future. And I want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about your colleagues, when you're thinking about your patients, because who arrives in that hospital room and you're rounding and you're trying to come up with a plan of action, you can't make assumptions on even how well they've taken care of themselves or what they've gone through, because you don't know what lands them in that position. So I wanted to open your mind up a little bit. And again, infuse the humanity when you're thinking about persons. So we will define and discuss the concept of implicit bias. We'll discuss the types and explore ways to mitigate bias. In this case, it was recruitment and selection, but I want you to think in terms of how you deal and handle each other, how you deal and handle your bosses, your supervisors, your chairs, and also your patients. This picture is just to remind me that the whole purpose of my office, my position, and even most everything that I do in terms of search committees, working to diversify medicine and to make the medical force mirror the population. And the population has everything. I mean, even this room. So differences in identity, and I can go down a whole list. We could probably say something different about everybody. Nobody in this room is exactly like anyone else. And your experiences and your identities are valuable and you are needed. I heard someone say, can I present a case to you? Well, if you thought exactly like the person that you were presenting that case to, what's the point? We need to bring our individual experiences. We need to see their value, and see the differences and know that those differences have value. So defining implicit bias, the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. The word here is unconscious. Our biases tend to be pervasive. You cannot stop them. They just happen. They are generally related but distinct from your explicit biases. If you prefer short brunettes versus tall blondes, that's just what you like. That's not an implicit bias. That's just what you like. An implicit bias is something that you just don't think about. It happens automatically. Think about how you got to work today. No one consciously said, okay, I'm going to leave my house. I'm going to turn right now. And I'm gonna take the back way because traffic's bad, and then I'm gonna do this. You don't think about that. You just leave your house and you get to work. Sometimes you might be sleeping coming to work or sleeping going home. But unconscious. They generally favor our own in groups. I say generally, but not all the time. I'll give you the best example that I know. When I came to the med school in 2016, one of my first responsibilities was to serve on the admissions committee and to interview potential medical students. And I was trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to decide who deserves to be in medical school? I never went to medical school and I'm not going. Y'all are all crazy for wanting to do this, but how do I know? And what I found was, there was a group that I was hardest on all the time. When I reviewed their applications, when I talked to them, when I had to give evaluations, I was harder on this one group. Black women. And I brought it to my own attention and I was trying to figure out, hey, down for the cause and rooting for your own, and I was hardest on them. And I'm sure that there were a number of reasons. Probably goes back to some of my own experiences. I distinctly remember being in the living room of my parents' home and having them tell me, well, you're gonna have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Because people aren't gonna believe that you're good, or that you're smart, or that you're capable. So maybe I was hardest on them because I was being my parents. You got to work twice as hard to get half as far. Victim of my own identity. And implicit biases are malleable, meaning we can change them. And one way to change them is to recognize them. Sometimes you can call it to your own attention. Sometimes you attend one of these trainings, it reminds you of your biases, but we can change them. I'll talk a little bit about examples and subsets of bias because there are different types. I won't go through every one, but we will take a few. Let's take anchoring bias. Cognitive bias that causes us to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we're given about a topic. So it's interview season and you are on the committee selecting the next class of residents. And time is your thing. You're a stickler for time. And when people are late, you think that they're lazy and they're unprofessional and that they don't take things seriously. And the perfect resident walks in 45 minutes late. You've already made your decision. You know that they can't be any good because why in the world would you be 45 minutes late for the most important job interview that you've had to date? Well, their partner died that morning. And they had to pull themselves together to get there for the interview. And they weren't coming, but people convinced them to come because they said, you're meant for Tulane. And the urology program is the best. So you gotta go. Your anchoring bias can cause you to overlook a perfect candidate without having all the information. Just an example. Let's talk sunk cost bias. Most people in this room, at least at this point, have had someone that you have mentored. Someone who looks up to you, someone whose maybe educational career you have tried to influence or guide. And they have looked up to you and they want to be what you are. And you have invested in them, you've written letters of recommendation, you've said, okay, I went to Penn, you need to go to Penn. I'm doing my residency at Tulane, you need to do that, you need to come behind me. What if they come here and this is not the program for them? And they're not the right fit. And maybe they shouldn't be in urology at all, they should be in OB-GYN. But you've sunk so much energy and time and effort into this person and you're biased, you know that they can do it. This isn't for them. Confirmation bias, we'll do one more. The tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. Well, you went to a state undergraduate institution and you feel that all Ivy Leaguers are pompous and privileged and spoiled.
I don't think we have any Ivy League.
Ivy Leaguers on here.
We have
We have a Stanford right here.
Stanford's not Ivy League, that's.
There's two.
Pompous, still pompous.
There's Punyala
So I will back off of the tail. But that's the way you feel and you have a candidate that's an Ivy Leaguer and they come in and they're perfectly competent, but they're just not right for the program. You said, see, I told you. I knew it. I was right because the Ivy Leaguer, no bueno, no good. So you have confirmed what you had in your mind and you were not even open to the fact that that person could come here and be excellent and do well. So, give you a few strategies to combat your biases. The first one is individuation. Please take people out of boxes. Please try to stop stereotyping and categorizing people according to what you think or stereotypes. Think of people as individuals. Even go further, consider counter stereotypical imaging. So if you think that, that's not a good example, won't say that. Think of people as individuals and say, not all blank does blank. Not all blank does this. Think about someone who goes against the stereotype that you might have in your mind and think of people as individuals. Don't put people in boxes and please don't make assumptions. Because when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Don't assume. Don't put people in categories. Please keep intersectionality in mind. Like I told you before, none of us are monoliths. We come to everything that we do with the sum of our experiences. So don't put me in a category. Because I can be underrepresented in one category and well represented in power and privileged in another one. And don't put all people in boxes. Also consider taking the implicit association test. I'll show you a QR code at the end. This is a Harvard initiative that's free online, and you can literally go online and take the test and test your biases against almost anything and everything. If you're asked to sit on a search committee, and sooner or later you will be, or on a committee to select the next class, or even for medical school, or even for a job, check your biases. It will bring them to the forefront of your mind and tend to remind you of biases that you have. So, when I was first given bias training, there were a couple of tools that I was given, and someone that I know brought these cards to me. So we'll play cards. And they say, DIY human, you don't need a license to use your humanity. So I will ask you to play cards with me, and I'll ask you to be brave, a couple of you, and just select a card, read it out loud and answer. There are no right or wrong answers. It's just going to infuse a little humanity.
And then just read it.
Yeah.
In one moment, a stranger's kindness can change how we feel about the world. When did you connect with a stranger? I was connecting with strangers all day at the clinic.
How so?
Just meeting people that I've never met before. And a lot of them, like, you know, a lot of patients, particularly at the VA, they get like a little sidetracked, you know, just because, you know, they might not have family at home or whatever, and so they're a little more social, and they're talking about their experiences doing whatsoever. So
I want to remind you how important those connections are. This summer, I had a doozy of a summer, and both of my parents had health issues, and my dad is a Navy veteran, and he lives and dies by the VA. You could say you could have care anywhere else in the world from any person. He's like, nope, I'm going to the VA. That's where I get my care. And he ended up being in the rehab facility for about 6 weeks. And he was given the absolute best care. So yeah, when you see those faces, take the hair off me, and that's his face. So that's really important. Thank you.
yeah.
Wild card.
Ooh, wow.
What do you secretly wish people would say about you behind your back? Tough. Physically and mentally. Yeah.
Tell me why you wish they would say that behind your back.
So women.
Because I guess that's what I like to think, that no matter what, I can do anything. No matter how, although this was the first year I was super sick. And I couldn't make it to work. Everyone helped me out, which was nice, but yeah, that's what I like to
what you said.
But you were super tough that time
Yeah,
too.
but just trying to be resilient. Do
So-
whatever I can.
I'm hearing that even sometimes when we feel like we're not at our best, we want people to see us at our best and realize that even if I'm not tough, I'm trying.
Yeah.
Okay. One more and then we'll go on.
Yes.
You. Yeah, we got.
Flowers and tears. Forgiving yourself can be harder than forgiving others. What should you forgive yourself for?
I didn't know you were gonna get that one.
It would be funny. If
Um,
Caleb, it's your turn.
So, hey, for me, a lot of times I'm tough on myself, like I always try to reach perfection. And I often have to say the enemy of good is perfect. So there's times when I'm not able to get to that perfect outcome.
Perfectly straight.
Exactly. Yeah. Good is good.
A lot
I
of,
feel like that's a
You live with
very
black
like
people.
common thing among doctors probably too, is that
Yeah.
we're very hard on ourselves. Give ourselves for not being.
Especially if, like, when you do surgery and there's like a million other factors that can cause a patient to have a complication. It's like, there's nothing that you can do.
Patient
Especially like
selection.
past actions that you can't like
Just
change
don't
or control.
and it is often easier, much easier for most of us to forgive others than it is to forgive ourselves. Sometimes we hold ourselves to a higher standard in like, I should be better. I should have been quicker. I should have figured this out. I should have. But forgiving ourselves is important. And realize that anybody can have an off day. So the person that first gave me bias training when she came, she had this ball. And it's literally a soccer ball. But it's a diversity ball. There are questions all over it. And I don't like to talk at people, and I want you to learn something about each other. So what I generally do is toss the ball or hand the ball, and wherever your right thumb is, you can read that and share. So. Right thumb.
Where do you see prejudice?
Okay.
Where do you see prejudice? As a brown guy who grew up in the South, I see it in a lot of places. I saw it in school growing up. Sometimes I see it with patients, sometimes I see it in restaurants. I think it manifests in very different ways. I think all you can try to do is be kind to those people and show them otherwise, and maybe help them realize that their prejudices are wrong.
You might have heard the kill them with kindness. Even sometimes you don't want to be kind if they've been unkind to you. It can be helpful. Not easy all the time, but can be helpful. You may hand the ball to whomever you like, or we're tossing the ball.
Describe the messages you received about race when you were growing up. Fortunately, I guess in school I did, but when I was growing up, my dad, it's kind of similar situation, and grew up in the South. He was like one of the first Indian people to work at Bell South. So then he told me stories about like prejudice that he was dealing with, and just like you have to work a lot harder, and there's certain places where you can't go in business or something at that time. So that was the message I received, is that you just need to go in a vocation where it's more merit based, rather than where you have like more internal factors that you can control. That was about it. I mean, fortunately, we didn't really talk about it, so Indian people don't really talk about that sort of stuff.
It's all general.
Yeah.
Pretty deep play.
What? No, I mean,
Deep play.
true. Like that.
I never knew.
Sorry, yeah, that's generalization, most.
I can, I'll share with you that I grew up in the South, Mississippi to be exact. And, Black church, mostly Black school. And I'll age myself, but when I was 6 or 7, miniseries came out called Roots. You know about Roots? So my mother said, don't watch it. What do you mean, don't watch it? ABC is talking about this. This is this long awaited miniseries, and this Black man wrote about his family. What do you mean, don't watch it? I'm gonna watch it. Roots is the story of Alex Haley's family, slave trade, Old South. Messed me up a little bit. I didn't know that part. I learned to listen to my mother when she would tell me again, don't watch something. I would not watch it. Yeah, but depending on which era, depending on the area of the country, depending on how your family was, can determine how you saw race. That, and I remember being a Girl Scout riding in the van of my troop leader, and we were riding through some area of Mississippi, and there was a Klan rally. And I don't know, I might have been 10. I felt some type of way. Because the white people that I knew and loved and that knew and loved me wouldn't dare. But they didn't even know me. Toss the ball one more time for me. Right thumb.
Have you people learned bias and stereotypes? Through school and work, I think. School mainly from, we had just kind of, I went to Catholic school for like 5 years and I switched to public school. But we did have religion classes, and we had classes that, for some reason, that religion classes, they spoke a lot about race and that type of thing. But then at work, once I started working at 14 or 15, I started to get exposed to what people working for. Sorry. We started meeting people with like different cultures, taught swim lessons, and we had like underserved in different areas of the city, some not so nice areas, and you're exposed to kind of like a swim lesson for a 8-year-old kid was kind of like the highlight of his week. It was free for him, and we did it on kind of a volunteer basis. It kind of like was a highlight of his week, learn to swim. No one else in their families knows how to swim, so it's kind of like giving them a small lesson that you pass it on to them, and now they can swim. And they felt pretty isolated before that. Had to sit out at pool parties from their friend's house. So just kind of something I took for granted, and I passed on a lesson to him, and hopefully he carried it on.
Anybody grow up in a family where their ideas about race were very different from what you have now? How
Think
so?
like about race, maybe not race.
Colorism.
I mean, like, I grew up in small town Arkansas, so like my entire high school was completely white, and like we had maybe 2 or 3 people that were not white in the entire school of 1,000. And so the growing up, the sentiment of, like, yeah, there was so much racism, like everywhere. And then I went to undergrad, and I was around, I was diverse, and I befriended a lot of those people, and I was like, I didn't understand, where all of this hate was coming from. And so, for my entire, growing up, like, yeah, it was real. Like the racism is there. Harrison, Arkansas, like I would live right next to it. That was the headquarters of the KKK. Like it's a real thing. And so the experience of knowing that, like, yeah, there are still like small town people that believe every single thing that you can think of, they do. And it's very interesting seeing that I'm on almost like the other side of that now. So
We're often shaped by our families, by our cultures, by our communities, even the section of the country where we grow up. And it's nice to step outside of that and just to see a whole different place. And then the profession that you have chosen, we're challenged to do the exact opposite, be as inclusive as we possibly can and to care for people when they're their most vulnerable, no matter who they are. So we will end our training with a few case studies. And I ask you just to scan it and read it. And you're asked to attend the end of the summer celebration for an academic summer program. You're a faculty member and attend with other faculty members. As such, during the event, all faculty members are addressed as Dr. Lee, Dr. Stevens, Dr. Reed, and Dr. Harrison, and thanked for their presence and participation. You are addressed as Edith and thanked for your presence and participation. You have earned a PhD in an academic discipline. If you're Edith, how are you feeling?
Angry. Only saying this as like, I'm assuming Edith is a female and the other people, maybe they're men. So they're addressed in a different way. And I mean, I've experienced that all the time as a female resident, but I would probably be annoyed knowing that person, okay, I got my doctorate, I should be addressed how everyone else is being addressed. And why am I the only one that's not being addressed that way?
Do you respond? And if so, how?
That's a loaded question. So I definitely responded this way in the wrong way, out of anger. Because after enough times, it's extremely frustrating. But I absolutely respond because I think people need to understand that it's how you want to be addressed. This is why I feel this way.
But how would you
I'm not
respond?
someone I
The
would
question is,
say,
how would you respond? So your first
stay out of my
response was you were
doctor.
angry.
yeah,
So you never respond when you're angry. to the person.
You're asking how should she
Well, how
respond?
would she respond? That's the question.
I'm telling you, I get angry. I don't want to be disrespectful.
But one thing I've always told you, you never send an email, you never do anything. when-
No, but I was saying like this, I can like relate to that in the sense of feeling like, if is this the only female that was there and they were called by the first name because of that? And if so, yeah, that strikes a chord within me of being like, well, it's a teachable moment to be like, why did you say this? And I use it to be like, I did this once, a couple of the residents were in the room with me. I was the only one addressed as the nurse and I was like the chief resident and all the other men were like, doctor, and I have 2 doctor badges. And he said, oh, hold on, the nurse just is talking to me. And I was just like, can you please explain to me, why you felt the need to say that to me? Because, like, oh, I meet so many people, I can't, I'm like, no. Is it because I'm a female and you felt the need to think that I'm a nurse because I'm a female? I try to be nice, but it's important because if it's bothersome enough to you, then you should use it as a moment to like teach people how you address certain people versus others is a reflection on how you look at them and give them opportunity to think about something they probably didn't even think about.
As the other female doctor, whenever this happens, I usually just kind of correct it and I go, actually, it's Dr. Pavlari. I usually make a joke, especially with like older veteran men who are like, women are doctors now, they let us do that now. And that usually kind of gets them. So,
I
and
would
that way you're
actually-
not like confronting.
I would actually say, the graduating class in the US today is 54% women.
I've actually heard him say that.
What's that?
That's true.
I've heard you say that.
I've heard you say that.
So what I say is, you know, my name is Harita Bavaluri. I'm the upgrading doctors in this country. The men are going down, women are rising.
That's true.
I have a different way of handling things.
I also usually make a joke that my fingers are smaller for DREs.
Yeah.
So.
I work 6.5.
But
Yeah.
yes, I think that there's good ways to make it.
She's so much real listening.
Okay. Just keep in mind that, there are ways to make these things teachable moments. Sometimes it's hard when you are in it, or if it's you or someone that you care about. We have to learn how not to pop off because that's unprofessional. But we still want to make it teachable moments. I'll give you just another, viewpoint. I've been on a million search committees. And the firm that we use, when we get together, the facilitator says, let's all use first names. Let's put everyone on the same level. Sometimes on those committees, there are positions, there are they're MDs, they're PhDs, but they're also staff members or nurse practitioners or other persons. So as to not isolate anyone, if you're in that situation, if we say, okay, it's John, Bob, and Bill. And so we don't have to worry about that. So just keep that in mind, moving forward. Next case study. You're asked to sit on a committee to determine if a private consultant should be hired to provide a contracted service to your organization. The presenter is a person of color with excellent educational credentials and many years of professional experience. Your respected colleague turns to you and shares how articulate they feel the presenter is and how impressed they are by them. You understand this to mean that your colleague assumed that they would be inarticulate and unintelligent. You wonder if your colleague is surprised by your level of professionalism and intelligence. In the moment, you just smile and nod. What happens later after you've had time to digest this conversation?
I don't know, I feel like with this type of thing, it's really, really common. And I think there's like, when you know someone really well, sometimes they can it's like that thing where you like, when you get to know someone, you like understand them as a person, like an individual, but you still like keep the bias of the group and don't like apply that. Like, hey, I know this person in this group who like is going against the stereotype, but I'm still gonna keep the stereotype of the group. And so I feel like that could be happening too. Also, these like code words that people use that are like so common, like articulate, are just like, it's like, I don't know, sometimes you're like, I don't know how to call you out on this because you think you're being nice, you know?
Is there a way to make this a teachable moment?
Could ask questions like, what did you mean when you said this? So you're not like confronting them, but you're just trying to understand what they meant, because it could just be that they didn't.
You say her a certain way.
There are actually
You
two
have
ways of handling the situation. One is compliments, because you did a good job, they turn around, they did a good job, so that could be one way. Or other responses, especially if my last name was Lerner, what the hell you think I am, things like that. So there are two teachable moments here. Just kidding, my last name is Lerner sometimes, but I don't respond when I'm angry, and I don't put emails when I'm angry.
Well, if your goal is to like have them have actual insight into their, like why, to cause them to have that, I mean, then you kind of have to have like a much deeper conversation. They're probably gonna feel like, or I would think like, they might feel attacked, being like, us getting a compliment.
But
Or
also,
like,
does this also give an opportunity as you as a person being like, do I have a bias against this person? And am I biased thinking that what they're saying, it has more meaning? Or or this person literally just saying, wow, they're really articulate and I'm really impressed by them. And maybe that there's no underlying meaning.
It's actually so true, because I've noticed people that use that, like, they'll use different ways of saying things, and you're like, that's a really weird way of saying it. And you're like, what are you saying right now? But then you have to like take a step back that are like, they have like a different way of like being brought up or taught, like English or like whatever.
I just want to say, I've been guilty of this bias myself
Mhm.
with one of my best friends.
Okay.
Who is Ethiopian,
Mhm.
and it was in college. I mean, there's a big story, but I did, it was we got into a big argument and stuff, and I didn't feel like I was learning, right? In that situation, I feel like I was arguing, trying to make a point. But it wasn't until my friend just calmly just sat me down, got me a coffee, and just talked to me about why the way I was thinking was biased,
Mhm.
until and him adding his own personal experiences as to why. That was the moment when I understood
Mhm.
the way that I should change the way that I'm thinking about this.
Mhm.
So, you know, is it a teachable moment? I think it is a teachable moment, but I think there are ways. It's unfortunate that the bearing of responsibility landed on him to teach me this, really. But it wasn't until he did that until I learned my own stuff.
Sometimes you don't know that you're putting a deficit lens on someone if that's not your understanding. And it's a two-edged sword, because sometimes a person of color might feel, well, what do you mean you don't know? How can you not know?
Right.
But the other person might be like, what are you talking about?
Right.
I was complimenting the person.
Why are you making it a big deal?
Why are you making it a big deal? Which makes it an even bigger deal.
Which makes it a bigger deal.
Agreed. Sometimes, during the trainings, it has come up, persons have asked, what do you do when you hear an offensive joke? What do you do when someone makes, a racist comment and you are not comfortable with it at all and you don't agree with it at all? Anybody have any thoughts on what do you do?
I would speak up,
I think you should bring it up.
say that's inappropriate to say.
I mean, it depends, in a clinic setting, that happens a lot.
I
Mhm.
personally think that method is ineffective.
Mm.
I personally feel that when someone makes an inappropriate joking, some
Mhm.
racist thing to you,
Mhm.
that, hey, you stop that, does not in any way get the message across to that person or teach them anything.
What's a better way?
Well, I don't think that, like,
That's my personal opinion.
I don't think you're gonna change perhaps like the way they think, but at least they're not saying it making you feel uncomfortable.
No,
It has
but
some
fundamentally, who cares what
details.
they think, or who cares about how you, don't you want the other person, the only real change that's gonna happen is if they flip the way they think. Right?
No, I think, okay, the way that this comes up in my experience is like, when you're in a thing and then like, you know, someone is like, oh, you agree with me because you're like the same, like, they perceive you to be the same as them. So then they're like, sexist joke, racist joke, like, whatever.
Mhm.
And then you just have to be like, no, that's not how. I don't feel like I don't agree with you on that. You just have to make it known, like, we're not, like, this is not like a buddy buddy type situation. Like, if you feel like that, then you know, you have to push back against it.
Tell me what you think.
It's kind of interesting because I think I take a lot of this from my childhood. My dad works in rural Appalachia and
Mm.
as a Middle Eastern man.
Mhm.
And his whole take on work and progressing in the workforce was you have to be nice and you have to show people you're kind and not this stereotype that people have made for you.
Mhm.
People say things like that, just try to move on from them. I think more that I've learned now is like you should address it, but I find it hard to address these things sometimes because I think a lot of times, like Caleb was saying, people end up feeling comfortable with you
Mhm.
and then they start cracking jokes, which actually end up being shots at you, and then you feel bad. But to that same token, I don't want to tarnish that relationship almost. They start to feel comfortable with the person that looks like me.
Mhm.
So I think it's a tough balance I'm still learning to navigate.
It's really tough if the person outranks you. or is grading you, or determines if you get the chief position or not, or determines if you graduate from the program. One thing I have advised, people to do is, put it back on them.
That's a clarifying
Yeah.
question.
What did you mean by that? And not in a confrontational manner, not in a adversarial manner, but explain. Because sometimes if they have to repeat back what they said, even if they don't agree, it lets them know that's not cool with me.
What do you do if people double think on that?
I still think the best way to crush one of those jokes is just like,
Yeah,
yeah,
just,
that's not funny.
yeah, yeah.
And then it's
yeah.
like, you take the power. You're
Or
like,
just
"Oh my
completely
God,
blow it
yeah."
off. Just be
Or
like,
you're like,
no.
wait, what? It's not funny? Okay.
I would say like the response you said, I had something said to me once, and I kind of did that response and I saw that person like, well, that's not what I meant, kind of thing, and you're like, but that's exactly how it came off.
And even,
And, you know, like, I know that you didn't do that, but like me and everyone else look it that way, so maybe don't say that again.
and that's how it can become a teachable moment, because if that's not what you meant, then don't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Because if you don't mean that, if that's not the persona or what you want to give out, then don't say that, because that lets them know, not only is it not cool, but I didn't appreciate it. Even if you weren't even talking about me or my group, you might be talking about my best friend, my partner, my spouse, my whatever. So we have to find ways, and it can be really difficult if there's a power dynamic. Okay, last case study. You are asked to give a presentation at the beginning of the academic year to a group of residents. You're part of an administrative team, and all members of the team are asked to give similar presentations. During the event, all faculty are introduced with their academic credentials, their history of affiliation with the institution, and their current responsibilities. You are introduced only with the announcement of your newly minted terminal degree. How do you feel?
Minimized.
Hmm?
Minimized.
Minimize. Are you inclined to speak to your colleague later, and if so, what do you say?
By teachable moment, do you mean that teaching the person, I mean, changing the personality of the other person, or teaching the person that how they can, how, I mean, how they feel about you and what do you feel about them? Because if you want to change the personality, I agree with Omer. The personality doesn't come at all doesn't come in just one day or like all of a sudden. Gradually, they build up their personality. So my idea, even if you brought it up, you won't change anything in their personality. Yes, you can speak up and you can say that I don't feel good about your attitude. Don't talk to me like that at the end of the day. So you just save yourself. You cannot change anything in the other person. In my idea, I won't speak up because I don't care that if a personality is not good enough, you cannot change it, and it's not. So you shouldn't. I mean, it shouldn't change anything in your mind about yourself. That's why I don't think that just speaking up can change anything.
Sometimes it's less about changing their mind, but more about letting them know what is inappropriate and what is unacceptable for you.
Okay.
So, you
In
know,
that case, yes, you should speak up.
I may not need to change your personality or how you feel about female physicians, but I do want you to know that I need you to respect me as a female physician and all of the female physicians that are my colleagues.
But Doctor, they may not.
Hmm?
They may not, still, right? Even if you're saying, hey, you don't say that to me. they're gonna still feel the same way probably.
Yeah, but maybe not explicitly, which is like in like the work.
Right,
Place
but
is-
like,
is what you're
like what
trying-
I'm saying, like, what is your goal? Right?
Your-
Or what,
your
what
goal
should be,
is-
what
your-
should be the goal, right?
Your goal is to not allow your implicit bias to translate into the workplace or affect actions or like treatment of other people.
The good thing is if there's a slide presentation, my title is the professor, by the way, I graduated from Tulane, I'm glad to be here. Boom, done. It all depends on the situation you're in. The thing
I
is,
feel, I
you
feel
can give
both
back.
probably have merit, probably
Nice.
both ways of thinking.
There's merit in all ways. I will do my best. It is 7:02. We're gonna,
I need 2 minutes of your time
oh, okay.
after you finish.
Okay, intent versus impact. So implicit biases are often unintentional and small. Microaggressions build up over time and can easily be felt and experienced at the macro level. So it's kind of like somebody poking at one spot. This doesn't hurt, but if you do it a million times, a microaggression can become a macroaggression. Recognition of the impact of your words and actions is important to ensure that all feel included, welcome, and valued. Everyone has value. Everyone. Personal culture or traditional beliefs should not excuse you from actively fostering an inclusive workplace. If you feel a different type of way, that's not what we're about here. That's not what we're about in this profession. So sometimes you have to check those things at the door. It's kind of like if you had a bad night at home, you have to leave that. You can't bring that with you. And this is the platinum rule. It's a step up from the golden rule. Instead of treating others as you'd like to be treated, consider treating persons like they'd like to be treated. One step further. That's the QR code for the implicit association test. And just a quote from one of my favorite authors. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And I will finally share all of the case studies. Every single one of those happened to me. I didn't make those up. I appreciate your attention, your participation. Don't tell anybody else, this was almost fun.
It was,
It was for
like,
me.
it was, I think we enjoyed that interactive.
got to learn a lot about
This was great.
Yeah, Donna, she's a multi-talented.
The point is to learn about your colleagues and to infuse humanity and to consider checking your biases. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, 2 minutes, I need 2 minutes. So why does bias occur over the centuries? Because one person thinks they're better than the other. So then it becomes a group and a class. Anybody read the book White Trash? It's a classic, you must have read it. It's written by Nancy Eisenberg, the 400 history of untold history of class in America. So how did that work? So the first people who got here were the English, and the English always had their nose up in the air that they are the best. They conquered the world and they felt they're the best and something about it. Come to the USA 400 years ago. The British came, they felt they were the ones. Then what happened? The Germans were there, so they kind of said, we are the ruling class. Now we need laborers. Who were the first ones they went to actually? The Irish. You go to Ireland in the pub and talk about English, they're going to throw you out today. Who constructed the Irish, the channel, which later became Canal Street? They had to import the Irish to do the legwork, the digging work, while they were supervised by the British and that. Then, of course, they moved up a little bit, education stuff. They said, well, we need other people to clean up things. Who do they get? The Sicilians. The Sicilians were considered way below the English and stuff like that. Anybody in this room who is going to be offended by what I'm saying is a history. So who were cleaning up the French Quarter streets and stuff like that? The Sicilians. I still cannot forgive. In the 1980s, we were in a church meeting, and one of the church members was English, accent still there. And they were talking and said, oh, he's just Italian. I was pissed. That means that Italian in that church didn't matter. So when you get a minute, as much as we think about this, even today, certain English families won't marry into Italian families and so on and so forth. Today, because of the implicit bias, if you read the book, White Trash, you will realize there is still, that's the history of mankind. I'm better, the other guy is not. That becomes a group, that becomes a family. That's where you taught, oh, listen, you're playing with that Italian? You're playing with the Sicilian? Then the Italians in the north thought that the Italians in the south don't associate, intermingle, stuff like that. The mafia was born in the south. So this is an implicit overly, even today. So don't think that it's just the way Raju Thomas looks or talks. It is all around us. When I grew up in India, of course, everybody looked kind of alike, but if you happen to be a Hindu Brahmin, and the Brahmin is about 7%, they said we are the rulers. And the other 93% have to bow to us. So I'm just telling you, this is even today,
I can't go.
same thing. If even in the Muslim world, there is a hierarchy of where you were born, how you were, etc., etc. So this is not going to go away. But what we have to do is to make sure that we respect each other, because everybody is, I always say, sometimes I say to God's children, and make sure that you treat them. In my history and physical, we never even put that African American or white. It's not there. So-and-so patient is 43, presents with this. We never hear talk about race when we present a history in this department. So if you think that somebody is looking at your name and stuff like that, don't worry. How do you become better? From the little age that I grew up, I'm going to be better than them. And I still think, when I go to the geosurgeon, stuff like that, the big dogs who know about to be president of the AUA. And I'm going to be president. I bet, I said, Jimmy, I bet he's thinking, how in the fuck did this guy become president? I couldn't become. I bet it's there, yeah, as they're walking onto the stage. But it doesn't matter. I enjoy it. I present my stuff. It's there. President of the AUA on my slide, chair of the department, boom, 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 and I speak, and I make a difference. Nothing would get me down all my life. But again, fortunately, I used to be top of the class, so in everything, so that kind of helped. That kind of helped. But I will never take no for an answer. I can, of course, supportive parents, supportive friends, make a big difference.
Top of the class.
That's why I tell my kids, you never let anything get you down. Rise up and fight. Fight not to hurt.
I like that.
Fight
Rise
to
up.
win.
Rise up. That's a good motto. Everyone should
Falcon stand over here.
rise up.
No one.
All right, that's the 2 minutes I have to say. White Trash.
Second hat.
If you haven't read it, you got to read it.
Thank you.